Uh, the topic that I've kept for this is slightly provocative, but I feel that there is reason for why this could actually be Great Depression 2. And the topic is it Great Depression 2 crisis in theory and policy? The outline of the presentation is as follows. Crisis in theory would essentially be a debate on the Phillips curve, essentially, whether it is vertical or horizontal, where the vertical is the mainstream position and horizontal is the heterodox position. Crisis of policy is what we see today in terms of the political priorities of preferring monetary over fiscal policy, tax cuts over spending increase, and third, obviously favoring 1% over the 99%, the famous Occupy Wall Street slogan. Let me start with crisis in theory, but before I do that, the reason why I think it is important to discuss theory is because that basically forms the backbone of what we see today as mainstream economics. And it continues to be so, unfortunately, despite this crisis, and that is what we are taught most of the time in better or otherwise universities and colleges. And I feel it's important to, and there have obviously been questioning of it, but it is still not, despite the logical inconsistencies in the mainstream economics, it is still prevailing itself, is something that we need to think about. Now, the point that I'm going to make is essentially the fundamental difference along which we can actually categorize the theories is the Phillips curve, because Phillips curve is essentially which gives you the position on how much policy can be is available, how much scope is available for policy. So as far as the mainstream theory is concerned, it's a very popular thing, basically the Lukács curve, which is essentially a vertical Phillips curve. So in the long as well as the short run in the mainstream economics, you basically go back to Nairu. Capitalism is self-equilibrating, so there is no need for policy. And the reason for that in case of outside money is the whole real balance effect. If you move away from Nairu, if the U is greater than Nairu, prices start falling eventually, and the real balance effect sets in. So you go back to Nairu and just the reverse happens on the left-hand side. I will not go into the details of it, obviously because of, most of people know about it. The second is when you have inside money, then their whole argument is the central bank policy, where you have inflation targeting, and when you do that, you can actually identify the rate of interest where you would have U is equal to U Nairu. Within the basic arguments, there are basically three positions. So monetarists started with adaptive expectations. So Friedman did say that in the short run you have a possibility of unemployment not being Nairu. So there is a variation which is possible, but in the long run, because of accelerating or decelerating inflation, you go back to Nairu. The new classical theory was essentially rational expectations. So your probability distribution about the future inflation is what gets into your Phillips curve. So essentially, on an average, the inflation that is going to be there tomorrow is what you predict today. So in that case, Lukács argued that Friedman was wrong even in the short run. So basically you are at Nairu all through, which means that there is no policy required at any point of time. The third, which is the new Keynesians, and this is the thing that new Keynesians are somehow, since they are questioning the new classical, they somehow belong to the alternative tradition, which they do not, because their methodology is still the same, the micro foundations. But most importantly, basically their conclusion is exactly the same as the monetarists, except that they give a different logic to it. So there is wage rigidity in the short run, and that's why you would be different from Nairu. And again, there is no policy required in the long run. Effectively, the conclusion being that in no way can the economy cross its Nairu. It cannot go below Nairu because accelerating inflation would set in, and it reaches there on its own, which is a more important conclusion to draw from the mainstream theory. Now this obviously has been questioned in heterodox theory of different kind, post-Keynesian, the Marxian school, where essentially, let me just place it like that, the basic point is that you cannot have prices, the prices do not decline, there is disinflation does not take place. So the possibility of when the unemployment is greater than NAIRU of prices declining and real balance effect setting in itself is not there. And if that does not happen, what you get is an L-shaped Phillips curve, which is again the same as Robinson's inflation barrier. So you can go up till U minimum. Beyond that you can't, but at least there are all these other points at which you can stabilize, and which means that capitalism basically fluctuates between chronic unemployment and inflation. And the logic is that there is no rational expectation, as well as inflation can't be negative. So you have that portion which is horizontal. And that has a very important role to play, where all these possibilities of where you finally settle down depends on the demand. At what point on this horizontal line would the economy finally stabilize would depend on the level of aggregate demand. Also, in that case, since the unemployment does not go to its minimum level on its own, you can pick and choose which unemployment rate would you want to have. At least economically you can. Politically, whether you choose or not is a separate question. So fiscal policy has an important role. What I have tried here is, I believe even this position, there is a limitation to that, because one, you're saying that there is a minimum of unemployment beyond which or below which you cannot go. The second point, which I think is more important, is that this U-min itself is decided by what is the level of sale. So if the concentration level in the economy or more monopolization happens, then the unemployment rate would have to be higher for there to be a stable thing, because the capitalists would be wanting for a higher share. So in effect, you can at best go to U-min, and this U-minimum itself would keep increasing with more monopolization and more unionization. I believe that is a difficult, I think that there are other ways in which things could be looked at, and definitely in the case of globalization, which one could argue that actually it's not L-shaped, it's completely horizontal. The Phillips curve becomes horizontal, which means demand does not have a role to play in inflation, and you can actually, there is no such U minimum. You can actually have a very low rate of unemployment and still not face inflation. Now this is an experience that the United States has had throughout the 90s and the 2000s, which is essentially what I associate with as globalization, and the reason is the workers' bargaining strength essentially takes a beating in the core, because you have this threat of job flight to the periphery, and if that happens, their nominal wages, and that's a claim that I'm trying to present here, is that their nominal wages are essentially tethered to the peripheral workers' nominal wages. Now when that happens, since the working class in the periphery is not as organized, so there's this downward flexibility in terms of their wages. So the relationship between unemployment and inflation in the core goes down. So basically it becomes horizontal with no minimum, but there could still be inflation which would come from the cost push side, and this is just some data. You can see that the second one, which is the globalization period, actually Phillips curve becomes completely horizontal. And that's what, and the other one, this is with respect to output, it's upward sloping. So there was some substitutability before globalization, but it doesn't remain to be so anymore. And the second data that you see is that unemployment becomes completely insignificant in the globalization period, whereas it was negatively related in the pre-globalization period. And the Mexican wages, the last one, as you can see, has a positive effect. Mexican is the only, that is the only wage data we could gather, and we could establish that. The second part of, since I only have 3 minutes, the crisis of policy. This is the current condition of the US economy, where despite this talk of there being this recession being over, because GDP has now started increasing, what you can see is there's a big difference between what the potential GDP in the economy, and this is government data, and the actual GDP. So even if this red line is increasing, it's still at least 7.5% less than what it would ideally have been had there not been a recession. Now what I've calculated here is that with the Obama stimulus, if we see the two possibilities, that if, so in all these quarters in post-Obama stimulus, the highest rate of growth has been 0.96% per quarter. If we extrapolate that in forecast, we see that at best in 2016, in the second quarter, would you go back to the potential GDP. So even with the best case scenario, you're not going to come out of this recession, and that's why I give this reason that this could actually be the Great Depression too. Nobody actually predicted in 1929 that it is going to be a Great Depression. It was only ex-post that people said this was Great Depression, and obviously if the average continues, you're never going to go back for a long period of time. This was the average, 0.59 in post-stimulus period. Monetary policy has become ineffective. The Fed has kept the nominal rate of interest close to zero for almost 3 years now. So there is not much scope that is left as far as the monetary policy is concerned. On the other hand, as you see that this is the multiplier essentially. So spending obviously has a higher multiplier than any of the taxes. You could see that the corporate tax multiplier is actually zero, the lower estimate. So for obvious reasons, and especially during crisis, this is again CBO data which says this. For higher income, since their propensity to consume is lesser, especially in crisis, their multiplier is also low. And for the lower income, it's slightly higher, but spending nonetheless is almost double. So if you spend $1, you get double the effect on GDP through spending than what you would do as tax cuts. Despite this, making this economic sense, this has not been Obama's priority, and I would like to give, reasons for that, because I believe 99% of the population, which is the slogan, were not a priority and will not continue to be a priority of Obama. As you could see here, that in terms of unemployment, if we have the current 3-month rate at which the unemployment is happening in the US, which is 137,000 per month, then it would go on till 2032 that you would go back to the level of unemployment that was prior to the crisis, which is 5%, the normal Nairu kind of thing. Whereas if you have the Clinton era rate, which was slightly higher, 200,000, even then it would be in September 2018 that you would go back to your earlier level. Only when you have an increase of 1 million jobs a month can you go back to the level by the end of this year at what you would have been otherwise had this recession not taking place. And that obviously is not coming up in the agenda of Obama, given the elections also coming and the Republican assertion, so to speak, happening there. But the 1% definitely is the priority, and as you can see, the bailouts, just the bailouts, are 1.5 and 4.6, which is about $6 trillion as compared to 0.7 trillion on entire spending. And the detailed data which is given below that, I have tried to calculate what I call a political priority quotient, which is essentially the fiscal expenditure divided by the entire financial initiative that the government has taken, which is essentially that if you spend $1 on financial bailout, you only spend 7 cents for the rest of the population. And this includes cash for clunkers, it includes advanced tech vehicle program. So it is obvious that this has not been the priority of the Obama government, and I'll end it with this. However, the people are too big to fail, and that's essentially what this movement was about, and I would assume that that is what would prevail given the direction in which Obama is going. Thank you.